Welcome on GAM channel. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment to get more videos from us. Remember to comment and give us an opinion on the topic. Today you're going to know about Nubia Kingdom and Nuba people. When discussing the civilization of the Nile Valley, many histories focus almost exclusively on the role of Egypt, but this approach ignores the emergence further south in the Nile of the kingdom known as the Egyptian as Kush in the region called Nubia, the area now covered by southern Egypt and northern Sudan. Nubia is a region along the Nile River located in what is today northern Sudan and southern Egypt, one of the earliest civilizations of ancient northeastern Africa, with a history that can be traced from at least 2000 BC onward through Nubian monuments and artifacts as well as written records from Egypt and Rome. It was home to one of the African empires. There were a number of large Nubian kingdoms throughout the post-classical era, the last of which collapsed in 1504 when Nubia became divided between Egypt and Sennar Sultanates, resulting in the Arabization of much of Nubian population. Nubia was again united within Ottoman Egypt in the 19th century and within the Kingdom of Egypt from 1899 to 1956. The name Nubia was derived from that of the Nuba people nomads who settled Nubia in the 4th century with the collapse of the Kingdom of Meroe. The Nuba spoke Nilo-Saharan language ancestral to Old Nubian. Old Nubian was mostly used in religious texts dating from 8th and 15th centuries AD before the 4th century and throughout classical antiquity. Nubia was well known as Kush, or in classical Greek usage included under the name Ethiopia. Historically, the people of Nubia spoke at least two varieties of the Nubian language group, a subfamily which includes Nubin, the descendant of Old Nubian, Kenuzi Dongola, Midob, and several related varieties in the northern part of the Nuba Mountains in South Kordofan. Until at least 1970, the Burijid language was spoken north of Nyala in Darfur but is now extinct. Prehistory. Early settlements sprouted in both Upper and Lower Nubia. Egyptians referred to Nubia as Tasseti. The Nubians were known to be expert archers, and thus their land earned the appellation Tasseti, or land of the bow. Modern scholars typically refer to the people from the area as the A group culture. Felta farmland just south the Third Cataract is known as the Prikelma. Culture in Upper Nubia as the ancestors. The Neolithic people in the Nile Valley likely come from Sudan, as well as the Sahara, and there was shared culture with the two areas with that of Egypt during this time period. By the 5th millennium BC, the people who inhabited what is now called Nubia participated in the Neolithic revolution. Megaliths discovered at Nabta Playa are early examples of what seems to be one of the world's first astronomical devices, predating Stonehenge by almost 2000 years. This complexity, as observed at Nabta Playa and as expressed by different levels of authority within the society, they are likely formed the basis for the structure of both Neolithic society in Nabta and the Old Kingdom of Egypt. Around 3500 BC, the second Nubian culture termed the A group arose. It was a contemporary of unethically and culturally very similar to the polities and pre-dynastic Nakada of the Upper Egypt. Nubia is believed to have served as a trade corridor between Egypt and tropical Africa long before 3100 BC. Egyptian craftsmen of the period used ivory and ebony wood from tropical Africa, which came through Nubia. In 2300 BC, Nubia was first mentioned in Old Kingdom Egyptian accounts of trade missions from Aswan, right above the First Cataract. The southern limit of Egyptian control at the time, Egyptians imported gold, ebony, copper, ivory, and exotic animals from tropical Africa through Nubia. As trade between Egypt and Nubia increased, so did wealth and stability. By the Egyptian 6th dynasty, Nubia was divided into a series of small kingdoms. During the Egyptian Middle Kingdom, Egypt began expanding into Nubia and to gain more control over the trade routes in northern Nubia and direct access to trade with southern Nubia. During the Middle Kingdom, Medjay no longer referred to the district of Medjay but to a tribe or clan of people. It is not known what happened to be district, but after the first intermediate period, it and other districts in Nubia were no longer mentioned in the written record. Written accounts detail in Medjay as nomadic desert people over the time they were incorporated into the Egyptian army. In the army, the Medjay served as garrison troops in Egyptian fortifications in Nubia and patrolled the desert as a kind of gendarmerie. This was done in the hopes of preventing their fellow Medjay tribes people from further attacking Egyptians' assets in the region. They were even later used during Kamoses' campaign against the Hyksos and became instrumental in the making of the Egyptian state into military power. Various pharaohs of Nubian origin are held by some Egyptologists to have played an important part towards the area in different areas of Egyptian history, particularly in the 12th dynasty. The 12th dynasty originated from the Aswan region. As expected, strong Nubian features and dark coloring are seen in their sculptures and relief work. This dynasty ranks as among the greatest whose fame far outlived its actual tenure on the throne. In the New Kingdom, the Nubians and Egyptians were often so closely related that some scholars consider them virtually indistinguishable as the two cultures melded and mixed together. In the Kushite period, when Nubians ruled as pharaohs in their own right, the material culture of Dynasty 25 was decidedly Egyptian in character. Kerma. From the pre-Kerma culture, the first kingdom to unify much of the region arose. The kingdom of Kerma, named for its presumed capital at Kerma, was one of the earliest urban centers in the Nile region. By 1750 BC, the kings of Kerma were powerful enough to organize the labor of monumental walls and structures of mud brick. They also had rich tombs with possessions for the afterlife and large human sacrifices. George Rancina excavated sites at Kerma and found large tombs and the palace-like structures. The structures named the Fuller alluded to the early stability in the region. At one point, Kerma came very close to conquering Egypt. Egypt suffered a serious defeat in the hands of the Kushites. According to Davies, head of the Joint British Museum and Egypt archaeological team, the attack was devastating, that if the Kerma forces choose to stay and occupy Egypt, they might have eliminated it for good and brought the nation to extinction. When Egyptian power revived under the New Kingdom, they began to expand further southwards. The Egyptians destroyed Kerma's kingdom and capital and expanded the Egyptian empire to the Fourth Cataract. By the end of the reign of Thutmose, all of northern Nubia had been annexed. The Egyptians built a new administrative center at Napata and used the area to produce gold. The Nubian gold production made Egypt a prime source of the precious metal in the Middle East. The primitive working conditions for the slaves are recorded by Diodorus Siculus, who saw some of the mines at the later time. One of the oldest maps known is of a gold mine in Nubia. The Turin papyrus map dating to about 1160 BC. Kush. When the Egyptians pulled out the Napata region, they left a lasting legacy that merged with indigenous customs, forming the Kingdom of Kush. Archaeologists have found several burials in the area which seem to belong to local leaders. The Kushites were buried there soon after the Egyptians decolonized the Nubian frontiers. Kush adopted many Egyptian practices such as their religion. The Kingdom of Kush survived longer than that of Egypt, invaded Egypt under the leadership of King Pir, and controlled Egypt during the 8th century as the 25th dynasty of Egypt. The Kushites held sway over the northern neighbors for nearly 100 years until they were eventually repelled by the invading Assyrians. The Assyrians forced them to move farther south, where they eventually established their capital at Meroe. Of the Nubian kings of this era, Taharka is perhaps the best known. A son and the third successor of King Pir, he was crowned king in Memphis. Taharka ruled over both Nubia and Egypt, restored Egyptian temples at Karnak, and built new temples and pyramids in Nubia before being driven from Egypt by the Assyrians. Meroe. Meroe in the southern Nubia lay on the east bank of the Nile, about 6 km northeast of the Kabushia station near Shendi, Sudan, 30 km northeast of Khartoum. The people there preserved many ancient Egyptian costumes, between unique in many respects. They developed their own form of writing, first utilizing Egyptian hieroglyphs and later using alphabetic script with 23 signs. Many pyramids were built in Meroe during this period, and the kingdom consisted of an impressive standing military force. Strabo also described a clash with the Romans in which the Romans defeated Nubians. According to Strabo, following the Kushite advance, Suetonius prepared a large army and marched south. The Roman force clashed with the Kushite armies near Thebes to Maharaka in Kushite lands. Suetonius then sent deputies to the Kushite in the attempt to reach a peace agreement and make certain demands. quoting Strabo, the Kushites desired 3 days for consideration in order to make a final decision. However, after the 3 days, Kush did not respond and Prytanis advanced with his armies and took the Kushite city of Preminus, south of the Maharaka. From there, he advanced all the way south to Napata, the second capital in Kush after Meroe. Prytanis attacked and sacked Napata, causing the son of the Kushite queen to flee. Strabo describing the defeat of the Kushite at Napata, stating that he made prisoners of the inhabitants. During this time, the different parts of the region divided into smaller groups with individual leaders or generals, each commanding small armies of mercenaries. They fought for control of what is now Nubia and its surrounding territories, leaving the entire region weak and vulnerable to attack. Meroe would eventually meet defeat by a new rising kingdom to their south, Aksum, under King Ezana. The classification of the Meroitic language is uncertain. It was long assumed to have been as the Afroasiatic group, but is now considered to have likely been an Eastern Sudanic language. At some point during the 4th century, the region was conquered by the Noba people, from which the name Nubia may derive. From then on, the Romans referred to the area as the Nubatae. Christian Nubia, the crown of a local Nubia king who ruled between the collapse of the Meroitic dynasty in 350 and 400 AD and the founding of the Christian kingdom of Nubia in 600 AD. Around AD 350, the area was invaded by the kingdom of Aksum. The kingdom collapsed, while Bishop Athanasius of Alexandria consecrated one Marcus as Bishop of Philai before his death in 373, showing that Christianity had penetrated the region by the 4th century. By the 7th century, Makura expanded, becoming the dominant power in the region. It was strong enough to halt the southern expansion of Islam after the Arab had taken Egypt. After several failed invasions, the new rulers agreed to a treaty with Dongola, allowing for peaceful coexistence and trade. This treaty held for 600 years. Over time, the influx of Arab traders introduced Islam to Nubia and it gradually supplanted Christianity. While there are records of a bishop at Ksar Ibrahim in 1270, his see had come to include that located at Faras. It is also clear that the cathedral of Dongola had been converted to a mosque in 1317. The influx of Arabs and Nubians to Egypt and Sudan had contributed to the separation of the Nubian identity following the collapse of the last Nubian kingdom around 1504. A major part of the modern Nubian population became totally Arabized and some claimed to be Arabs. The vast majority of the Nubian population is currently Muslim, and the Arabic language is their main medium of communication in addition to the indigenous Old Nubian language. The unique characteristic of Nubian is shown in their culture, dress, dances, tradition, and music. Islamic Nubia. In the 14th century, the Dongolan government collapsed and the region became divided and dominated by Arabs. The next centuries would see several Arab invasions of the region, as well as the establishment of a number of smaller kingdoms. Northern Nubia was brought under Egyptian control, while the south came under the control of the kingdom of Sennar in the 16th century. The entire region would come under Egyptian control during the rule of Muhammad Al in the early 19th century and later became a joint Anglo-Egyptian condominium. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe, like, share, and comment to get more videos about world history. Remember to comment, give us your opinion about the Nubian kingdom, what you learned and what wasn't said.